To our very special guest.
Yes, tonight is we're really pleased and humbled to have someone with us. It's all about one man tonight, and that's not me, and that's not Keith. We have with us James Kahn, the author of the novelization of Return of the Jedi. So we're really super excited. James, how are you? How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, that's great. No, we're really excited to have you, and it's a really exciting time. And whoever would have thought in 2015 that we'd be sitting here on the eve of the movie that is a sequel to this little book that you were involved with. How does that feel?
It's exciting. I'm just as excited as every other average fan about the movie coming out. I'm really excited about what I anticipate the direction J.J. Abrams is taking it, which is sort of back to the beginning.
Right, right. And the Star Wars that so many of us know and grew up with and we're familiar with. And there's been such an emphasis on that. So it's really exciting. And
that reminds me of just something Keith just said about his wife teaching fourth graders. I was at the Star Wars celebration at Anaheim a few months ago, signing books, and it was so touching to me how many grown men would come up and say that was the book that they learned how to read on, or that was such an important book to them, or they kept that book under their pillow. And it gave me a new sense of humility, and also just how wonderful it is the way books can touch people.
That's so cool to hear. That's really wonderful, and I think that speaks to the timelessness of these stories. I was really intrigued in learning some things. I mean, I've tracked your career for many years, and I'm familiar with a lot of the things you've been involved with. But in preparation for this, I've actually discovered some really super interesting things, and I was wondering if you could give me a little bit about your medical career. From what I understand, you graduated the University of Chicago, and you ended up at UCLA, and you guys, the staff you were with, were on the forefront of some pretty amazing emergency staff, and I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, it was, initially I was going to go into medicine to become an internist, but I realized that that's a doctor who has patients of his own all the time really turns over his life to that calling. And I was still so strongly drawn to writing. I wanted a specialty where I could be on very intensely when I was doing it, but then I could also schedule myself off for periods of time to write. And emergency medicine wasn't really even a specialty at the time I went into it. It wasn't a board-certified specialty until a few years later. But I went initially actually not to UCLA, but to USC, LA County.
Okay.
And that's the busiest emergency room in the world. They had 1,000 patients a day, and the Army sent their battlefield surgeons there because it was the closest to battlefield conditions you could get in a civilian population.
It was a MASH unit.
It was, yes. That was very intense. It was really exciting.
Sounds a little bit like this new well, no, it's not Netflix. It's some on-demand show. Every once in a while, wife goes to bed earlier, and I try to pick something that I don't know if she'd watch. And it's this new series, I think, Code Black.
I heard about it, but I didn't think it was a series. I thought it was a feature. Or a feature.
No, I think it's a series because I watched like 2 episodes, and it sounded just like the hospital you were talking about. And they said most hospitals are in Code Black a couple times a year. At Angels, we're in Code Black 300 plus days a year.
Yeah.
And it goes on with that, and it was so it sounded like it was at the very least a similar.
Yeah, I think it was the same hospital actually.
But now I'm wondering, do you still pursue things like that? You wrote some for ER, some for St. Elsewhere, I think it was, General Hospital.
Yeah.
Do you still send out letters to those saying I'd like to write an episode for?
I haven't in probably 6 or 7 years. I've 2 things I've kind of burned out on a little bit. One was actually working in emergency rooms. The other is writing in television rooms. I'm trying to shift over to feature films and music more now these days.
Yeah, and actually, and speaking of that, we can right into what you're currently working on now, which is really intriguing. Wrongside Bob,
Right.
and right before I even ask you about that, and we'll talk about that. I'd really like to encourage our Star Wars reporter fans out there. Check out Wrongside Bob. It's James' current project, putting a lot of heart into it, and looking for some help, some financing help, and there's some packaging involved. One of the packages I noticed actually includes a signed copy of Return of the Jedi. What would be well, I'll let you tell us, James. Number one, what's the best place to go to support and discover more about Wrongside Bob? And if you could just give us the general laydown on what exactly it is.
Sure, I appreciate the plug. It's we're doing a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. So if you just go to Indiegogo.com and type in Wrongside Bob on their search engine, you'll find our campaign site. The movie it's really my passion project, and it started with my music. I started really getting much more deeply into music several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I used to play guitar in rock and roll bands in high school and college, and then pretty much abandoned it for a long time. And then realized half a dozen years ago how much it meant to me. And I really started getting much more involved in it, and ended up writing a couple dozen songs and producing 4 CDs of roots music albums. One of them was a concept album called Man Walks Into a Bar. And every song on the album was about one of the people in this bar on this given night, and how their stories all intermingle, and there's a big meta story connecting them at the end. And as soon as I had come out with it, all my friends said, "Oh, this is really..." Well, some of them said, "This is a musical. You really got to produce this for the stage." And the others said, "You ought to make a movie out of it." So I turned that around over and over for a number of years, and finally wrote a script taking one of the characters, who's actually kind of a minor character in the CD, alongside Bob, and making him one of the major characters, the title character. And the short story of the movie is a drifter with amnesia who's struggling to remember his past, runs into this quirky old guy in a bar who's desperately trying to forget his past. That's Wrongside Bob. So the two of them help each other, along with all the sort of oddball regulars in the bar, get through this mutual life crisis they're having. There's kind of a minor crime story involved, a sort of Elmore Leonard-ish kind of thing. It's a comedy drama. There's a lot of music in it, in the same way that there was a lot of music in "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" a lot of Americana music.
Right.
And I'm just really, we're doing it on a very, very low budget, and doing it all myself with a little help from my friends. And I'm hoping as many people who see it can get excited and want to come along on this journey with me. And as you said there, I don't know how many people are familiar with crowdfunding campaigns like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but you donate whatever you can donate, and depending on how much you donate, we give you perks for that. And the smaller perks are like a T-shirt with the Wrongside Bob logo on it, a download of the movie when the movie comes out. But the more you donate, the more perks you get. So yes, there are some signed autographed copies of Return of the Jedi.
Cool.
I have some actually very valuable vintage memorabilia as well. When I was writing it, they sent me both a lot of glossies, 8x10 glossies and 5x7 glossies, production stills that were shot either on the set or in the dressing room, identifying all the various characters and their wardrobe and what the sets looked like, to send to me so I could have visuals to write from the book. So I'm giving those away as perks, autographed on the back, with a little sentence saying that this photograph was used by me to help write the book. And then probably the most valuable perk is they actually sent me slides, transparencies, that are stamped "Revenge of the Jedi," which was the title of the movie before it was changed at the last minute.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of those things where I wasn't sure if it was an old wives' tale rumor or what. I could have sworn I remembered hearing it was going to be called Revenge of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It came out and it was Return of the Jedi, and this was before the days of Facebook and Twitter and everything.
Right.
So
Right.
you'd hear something and you'd go, "Did I really hear that? What paper was that?"
There was a little bit of merchandise that got out, I believe.
Yeah, and I have some of it. They sent before they changed the title. Everyone who worked on the show, I got a Revenge of the Jedi T-shirt and a poster, and it was really at the very last minute that George decided revenge was not a Jedi-like emotion, and they had to change the title. I have to mention one more perk we're giving away, which is I got an apologetic call from Random House a few weeks ago that they just reissued the original trilogy of novelizations, and they spelled my name wrong on the cover. They spelled it was a big no-no for a publisher.
On the Jedi?
On the Jedi, yeah, by James Kahn, Khan, instead of Kahn. So they destroyed a lot of. As soon as they discovered it, they just destroyed what they still had in the warehouse. But a lot of them still got it out into the wild. So I got 6 of them, and I'm going to sign them Kahn.
I was trying so hard to resist the Kahn, and I'm like, how many thousands of times has that been thrown at you? Especially since you're mostly affiliated with Star Wars, and your name Kahn of Trek. So.
Well, I don't know if it's taboo on Star Wars Reporter, but he's pretty famous in the Star Trek world too. I'm a big fan of Voyager.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
No, I love it all. I mean, I love it all. I mean, the Star Wars fans out there, we can like it all. We can like all of it.
We should be able to get along.
Exactly. I believe.
Why can't we all be friends?
That said, I don't think I have any Star Trek Legos, but I'm not missing many Star Wars.
And the other reason I went into emergency medicine was it felt like it was a very contemporary way to feel like a wizard. I mean, wizardry and sorcery and comic books was always a big part of my growing up. And here was this thing we could do now where someone could be brought into you dead, and you could pull him back from the dead and let him live again. It was really an exciting kind of thing to learn how to do.
That's really neat. And and thinking about that, because I just think so many of us, and probably a lot of people watching this, we have our 9-to-5 job, and then, we're also thinking of music, we're thinking of books or any creative projects. And I'm just trying to imagine, because I've found my mind, at work sometimes. I think of an idea, and I think of you on the forefront with somebody, ripped open, and you're trying to fix a vital organ, and then suddenly, wait, I got a great idea for Luke Skywalker.
No, I mean, things like that would happen. I would have to, wait until I was done with the patient, but I always carried a notebook around with me to jot down thoughts and ideas and stories and characters. It's a great way to gather material.
It must have been unbelievable, and there's been a lot of successful writers from the medical field. But I just picture, nurse, scalpel, and a clipboard and a pen, because I got a really cool idea from this.
Well, starting with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who invented Sherlock Holmes. He was a doctor.
Right.
In fact, Holmes was based on Doyle's professor in medical school, a doctor named Bell, who used to stun all the medical students. They would bring in a patient that he had never seen before, and as the man walked across the room and sat down in front of him, he would tell the audience of medical students all about this patient he had never seen before, just by looking at the way he walked and how he was dressed, and then what his accent was. So that's how Conan Doyle invented Sherlock Holmes.
Wow, that's really neat. Wow. And so you wrote your first trilogy. Was that World Enough and Time?
Right, World Enough and Time, Time's Dark Laughter, and Timefall.
Timefall. Okay, and you were right, and you wrote that during this period. Now, were you also working on? Because I know you've done so much with television, St. Elsewhere and ER with a young George Clooney, and so many shows. Was that also going on around the same time period?
Yeah, I think I graduated from the residency in '79, and I just started working emergency rooms around Los Angeles. And it was during that time, starting around 1980 or so, that I started getting involved in show business. And it was actually many people have heard this story, but my medical career that really launched me into this whole racket. When I was working at an ER in Santa Monica, we got a phone call from Kathleen Kennedy asking if anybody in the ER could help us resuscitate an alien. So several of us went down to the set of E.T. and I got to
expecting a real alien.
Yeah. It was
Were you disappointed that it was just a movie?
No, not at all. We knew it was Spielberg, and I was so excited because I was such a huge fan of his. Just the idea of even getting to meet him. So we all went onto the sets and got there. Well, in the middle of he was directing a scene, but when it was over, he came over and introduced himself. He was really friendly. He was just like a nice guy. So we got to know each other a little bit. I got to watch him direct. They dressed us all up in those hazmat suits, and we pounded on E.T.'s chest and shouted out resuscitation orders. And during that period, I gave him a copy of my first sci-fi novel, World Enough in Time, and asked if he'd like to make a movie of that.
There you go. Yeah, right. The opportunity.
Yeah. So he said he was a little busy right then. He handed it off to Frank Marshall, who was producing E.T. And Frank read enough of it to like it, so they assigned me the novelization of Poltergeist, which was in post-production at that point.
So Poltergeist was actually before you did E.T.?
Well, I didn't actually do the book of E.T. I was in the movie. You can actually see me as one of the doctors carrying a clipboard in the resuscitation scene, dressed up in a hazmat suit. But I actually had to leave the shoot a little bit early because they gave me a month to write Poltergeist, and I had to get right on it.
Oh wow!
So and then they were so happy with Poltergeist that led to Return of the Jedi and Goonies and all the others.
Goonies. Ah, that's right. Now, who in the world doesn't like the Goonies?
I think that's one of my wife's favorites.
Yeah, it was a great story. It was.
That movie is universally beloved. I mean, it's so fantastic.
Yeah, and I get almost as many props for that as I do for Jedi. I can't tell you how many people, especially people in their 30s, their early 30s, mid 30s, who say that was such an important book for them, and they always felt like a Goonie when they were a kid.
Right. I think the Goonies. It was like we all loved Star Wars, for obvious reasons, and the Goonies felt almost like that was an adventure that maybe could happen.
That any of us could go on, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like you felt like, man, this is what we were kids running around, in the woods or hanging out.
And in fact, prepping to write that, I reread Treasure Island and Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, cool.
Because both those, I decided I wanted to write Goonies in the first person from the point of view of Mikey Walsh. And those are two adventure stories that I loved growing up. And they were also like from the point of view of the kid who went through the adventure. It was like any one of us might be able to go through an adventure like this. So that was the kind of spin I put on writing the book.
That's fantastic. Now, when it did finally come to Jedi, was that something that Spielberg then suggested to Lucas, or just all those guys were kind of connected?
Yeah, it was funny. Lucas was his novelizations were published by Random House in Del Rey, which is the imprint of Random House. It was run by Lester Del Rey, a great old sci-fi author, and his wife Judy Lynn. So when Lucas was ready for someone to do the novelization for Jedi, first he asked Judy Lynn Del Rey if she had any recommendations. Well, to my great good luck, she was my editor and had published my trilogy, my World Enough in Time trilogy. So she gave him my name and said I was a great writer. And then Spielberg chimed in. When he mentioned me to Spielberg said what a great job I had done on Poltergeist. And so that sort of clinched it.
Oh, wow. That's really neat. So, I mean, did you just have like an oh my God moment when the word came in that, hey James, we're you got Jedi? It
was incredible. That's another, just like meeting Spielberg, who was a huge hero. The whole Star Wars and the Star Wars universe was it's just amazing renaissance of movie making and storytelling and mythology to me that I just loved. I was a huge fan.
And it was all, I mean, it was just peaking right there too. And
yeah, absolutely. This was like, the beginning of the culmination of the trilogy, of that trilogy.
right. No, that's really neat. I had read the Return of the Jedi novel, I don't know how many times back in the day. And actually, a bit of self-indulgence real quickly, too. It's funny because I recently moved and I was going through my books. And, of course, I have my Return of the Jedi. There's your book there. And there's a first edition. I have to add that. And this was pretty cool. I found this amongst my stuff, which I hadn't seen, which was the first run of the Star Wars novel before the movie actually came out, and was released in '76. It was actually released in December of '76, and it's got the Macquarie original artwork on it.
Right.
And that was right next to your Return of the Jedi book. And then, I also had found the Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Yeah.
So
I was hoping I would get the assignment to write the novelization for The Force Awakens. And I was told it was a short list, but I got beat out by Alan Dean Foster.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
Yes, he wrote the very first novelization for Star Wars for Episode 4, New Hope.
Right. And then ended up doing Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Yeah.
With Jedi, I actually, just a couple quick questions of detail about that. There's so many stories, and even just like what you were discussing with Revenge of the Jedi, and within the book itself, I mean, there's some pretty legendary scenes in it, and one of them, the great Anakin falling into the molten lava, which is how he became Vader. And I was wondering, how much of that did you have any say or involved, or a scene like that? Were you able to throw in any amount of your own ideas into that? I mean, Return of the Jedi, the language in it is beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
And some of it is unmistakably James Kahn. And I was wondering, creative-wise, how many, were there any, like, even just little parts, like, hey, George, like, I've got this cool little scene. I mean, I know it's his story, but can I throw this in there?
Yeah, there are a few examples of that. The example you brought up is actually pure George. He had that firmly in mind and told me to put that in there.
Right.
On the other side of that, I made up a whole backstory for Princess Leia that wasn't in the script, and he cut that out because it didn't jive with the backstory that he had in mind. That's totally fair. But the one thing that I did bring to it, one of the things I brought to it was that people ask me about a lot, is the notion that Obi-Wan and Uncle Owen were brothers.
Oh.
And that was my idea. In my first talk with George, I was referencing the scene in the original Star Wars where Luke is asking about old Ben Kenobi, and his uncle kind of snaps at him and says, don't have anything to do with that old hermit.
Yeah.
And so I said to George, it sounded to me like kind of a family dispute. That's the kind of thing that brothers who are pissed off at each other sound like. And in my mind, long ago, Ben decided he wanted to go off and be a Jedi. And it caused a huge family rift, and their father wanted him to stay on the farm, and he went anyway, and they never forgave him. And his brother always blamed him for their father's early death because he was the favorite son and he left to be a Jedi. And now Obi-Wan came back with baby Luke and asked, put familial pressure on his brother to raise Luke. And his brother didn't want to, but Aunt Beru was barren and she couldn't have kids of her own, so she prevailed on her husband to adopt this little baby. And so he finally took him in, and Obi-Wan promised he would just stay in the desert out of sight and not bother them and kind of keep an eye on Luke from afar. And I just sort of invented this whole little backstory on the spot. And George said, yeah, that sounds about right.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Just remember, I mean, some of this is impressions from reading it long ago. I remember the space battle had a little more detail. I mean,
Yeah, I added more detail to everything, really. More physical, visual detail, more character depth. It's sort of that's what you do in a novel. My first drafts tend to be just kind of using the script as a skeleton plot outline to do a very quick draft that way. And then on subsequent drafts, I go over it in much more depth and give that motivation and backstory and character relationships, and I can expand on scenes. You know, the original Vader's death scene in the script that I was writing from was only 4 lines long. It just said, Luke takes off Vader's mask, he's disgusted and repulsed by what he sees, and Vader says, "It's too late, Luke," and he dies. That was the whole scene. I thought, gee, that needs to be really expanded and deepened, and we need to see a father-son, you know, regrets and reconciliations, and
right.
so I expanded it to like a 4-page scene in the book, and that's what books do.
That's fantastic, and yeah, I mean it's such a pinnacle part. I mean, of the entire story. So you know, obviously, so yeah, it would deserve that treatment.
The emotional core of the whole story to me was that scene.
Yeah, because there's the Skywalker family, there's Vader coming full circle and resolving, and I remember I don't know why this sticks with me, and maybe even now I'm making this up, but I remember. When the rebels were attacking the Death Star and the shield was still up, and for some reason it was always poignant to me. There was described, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was one of the X-wings or a Y-wing didn't pull up in time, and struck the surface of the shield around the Death Star. So one of the guys didn't make it, and I don't know. That stuck with me, and that was in the novelization.
It was, yeah. Whenever I could bring sort of a personalized, a more generalized story, it's always a help.
Right. Well, I want to push everybody to you know, or urge everyone to check out Wrongside Bob. It really sounds like like you said, a labor of love and a kind of a personal story. What I read about it in my investigation of it too, and how you described the story of it, some of it was that had to deal with the masks, if you will, that we have to wear in our lives. And my impression was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you know, people have to put on a face, if you will, in certain aspects of their life, and then maybe with Wrongside Bob, some of it is that he, over time, is like, wow, you know, wait a minute, what if I, you know, what's the real me?
Right, exactly. If you wear a mask too long, you start to forget who the real you is inside. If you put on a face for the outside world and it hides your deepest soul inside, then it's easy for that to get lost. I was once in a writer's room where one of the writers said all writers have a line that can describe more or less the essence of everything they write. It's a theme underlying whatever they write, even if it's not specifically the script is about that, some aspect of the script contains that theme. And we didn't really believe it at first, and then we went around the room and everyone found their own. Someone said, you know, actually, you know, my line is, what's my place in the world? And another one said, my line is, life sure changes in a hurry. And someone said, I've got a secret. And someone said, my line was the masks we wear. And if I look back at all the scripts I've ever written, there's some elements about someone hiding who they really are from the world, and then sometimes from themselves.
But the Wrongside Bob, it, you know, and God, I hope I'm not touching on anything touchy here, but it seems like a story, like personal struggle of somebody's life after, like, the kind of story that somebody would tell after they made it through something pretty dark. It just doesn't seem like it's your life. Like, from what I've read about you, it doesn't seem like you are Wrongside Bob.
It's not my life really, but it feels very close to to the things that I feel and have seen about people. It's about the people that I lived up in an area of California called the Mother Lode for about 10 years, which is the Gold Rush country on Route 49. And it was full of small little, backwoods roadhouses like this. And these characters inhabited all those places. So I know those guys real well. And beyond that, there's a way in which there's a little piece of me in every one of the characters in this. The sort of, a drifter who can't really remember who he was. There are times that, I've been so many different people over the course of my life. A doctor and a singer and a writer and a this and a that. It's like sometimes it's hard for me to wonder, well, who am I really? And that's kind of what this is about. This feels like just a personal story to me about the way all of us ask, who am I really? That's kind of what this is about.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it looks really interesting.
I hope so.
No, it's fantastic. I really, really, again, I really appreciate you spending the time with us. Really, really enjoyed it.
Been my pleasure.
And yeah, so there you have it. We have that was a great discussion with James Kahn, and you're watching this hopefully on our YouTube channel or on StarWarsReporter.com. And Facebook, our growing number of members on Facebook have it's really been great to see, and we look forward to supporting James Kahn. And I'm thinking of starting a campaign to get you to write the novelization for episode 8.
Love that. Start that bandwagon going.
Your friend Alan doing the 7, but we got a few more movies in the pipe.
That's right. I'm raring to go on 8. So if you can get a groundswell viral sort of shout out to Random House or to Lucasfilm or whoever is going to be involved in that decision, I'm ready.
Well, it's not just 7, 8, and 9. There's going to be the whole Han Solo offshoot.
Right?
I guarantee there's going to be a Boba Fett offshoot, and I'm hoping that my new Disney favorite is going to be doing it, Daniel Logan. Someone I met for the first time this past Star Wars weekend. A really charming guy, and would make a great 20-somethings Boba.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of stuff.
But episode 8 is really in my sights.
Cool.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, we'll have to make a little bit of noise about that.
Good.
Well, again, we really, really appreciate it, and time very, very well spent, and just a real pleasure to meet you. And
I had a great time talking to you guys. I appreciate the interest.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody in Star Wars Reporter for watching.
I got out of the wrong side of the bed this morning. I got out of the wrong side of the bed this year. I believe the world that I was born in is worn out. It's welcome, honey, give me that beer.